diligence, but we're not going to spend a whole lot of time other than that. The countries that have rules of law, like the U.S. and most of Europe and all that, they do follow those laws. The agent, having spent lots of time with agents, they have 1,000 things to do. Chasing down some nerd running a Tor Executive node is not their priority. They're literally going to look at it and be like, all right, you know what? Murder, rape, death, organized crime, Tor Executive nodes over here, whatever. I'll work on this hand first. Yeah.
What's your take on privacy enforcing VPNs? Is that are they really effective? It seems like people are using them more and more, and I've seen more and more advertisements for them.
Yep. So I think it's first at the macro level, it's a symptom of people are becoming aware of how much data is being collected and how much you can grab off your internet connection. You go to Starbucks and the Firesheet plugin for Firefox that snips your traffic and gives a list of all their passwords and all that, much like the old wallet sheet at DEF CON or Black Hat or something. Any idiot can do that now. You can install a module and it clicks and it does everything for you. Now you can go stalk all the pretty girls at Starbucks, and they do all the time. So people start using VPNs to realize that maybe I need to protect my traffic. A number of VPNs have been cut out because they log everything, because they're set up by someone who doesn't really care. They just figure they can make a quick buck. They log everything. The police come to them and say, "Hey, you have all these logs. Give them to us." And you're one guy who makes enough to buy your coffee in the morning off your VPN or something. And so they just give them up. And now there are some privacy VPNs that say we don't log anything, or we keep our logs for one day and purge everything or whatever. Part of the concern there is they still have the logs. They still have the ability, even if you trust the VPN's run by the worst criminals in the world, and they actually won't cooperate with police ever. The network in can just be tapped, and they get to see all your traffic in and out. And traffic and timing analysis research shows that with 99% accuracy, even with a VPN, you can still pattern match which website someone's going to and what they're doing. So they don't even need the VPN logs anymore. They can just watch the network. Yeah.
Andreas, my question is, what would your sort of preferred solution be for law enforcement in terms of its legitimate investigative needs? Obviously, these kind of circumvention tools pose a problem for them, but at the same time, they recognize the validity and the necessity of it for all sorts of other reasons. I mean, do you have kind of an answer to law enforcement folks that say we're going dark and you're part of the problem?
Oh yeah.
And what would that answer be? I mean, obviously there's a benefit too, and I think they recognize that. Where would you strike that balance?
My first answer, because I've been asked that question point blank by every 3 or 4 letter agency in the world, has been you need education. That the dumb criminals use their own home address and use their real name. All the smart ones they go after at that level already use proxy companies, fake addresses, they steal identities. They're already used to having to go through 7 layers to actually figure out the actual criminal. The same thing on the internet. Just because you can push a button in the old telephone world and do a wiretap and get all that stuff happening, you can't do that on the internet. Even if Tor went away tomorrow, it's not going to stop crime. There's research out there that's going to be coming out that's sponsored by the DOJ actually, that Tor traffic malicious traffic on Tor is 2 or 3% of the total traffic they see. And at the same time, all these 3 and 4 letter agencies, the investigators are like, don't ever take Tor away, because all these other tools have backdoors or lawful intercept, and the criminals know the lawful intercept codes to watch us watching them.
Right.
Most of what we've tried to do is just educate, here's what Tor is and is not, and here's how to get around Tor, and in every case, law enforcement goes after the human or the criminal at the end, not which technology they use.
I mean, would you make something like these things mandatory for security purposes to secure traffic?
I think legislating that's probably a bad idea. I think it will naturally happen, and you already see it happen with VPNs, and give it another 10 years, and everyone will be fully aware of. Everyone will want to spend their money for the 15 minutes of anonymity on the internet. Anyone else?
ask one question?
Yeah.
So the map that you showed,
Yep.
where does the information for that come from? How do you know what's being surveilled and what's not being surveilled?
That's from Wikipedia, actually, collected by like 1,000 people, as to what surveillance happens, black hole. They have a whole list of where they got their source data from. Yeah.
If I may. Connecting your talk to the earlier talk on international conflicts, you are a non-state actor. So when you penetrate somebody's frontiers and enter
Yep.
another nation state, it's not an act of war because you're not a nation state. But does it raise issues of, are you like Al-Qaeda on the web from the point of view of Iran, a non-state actor that's violating the sovereignty of another country?
I don't know how to answer that. I think no. So Tor is downloaded by citizens of a country. Citizens use it to circumvent the firewall. Most countries don't make that illegal. It's just sort of like a misdemeanor of you bad person. Even like Burma and Iran and let's say North Korea, but it's not even in North Korea. Don't make it illegal to use circumvention tools because there's legitimate reasons to use a VPN and all that for business, and the commercial world uses that. I've never heard from any of these, even the U.S. government. We've never heard from any governments officially saying you're bad people. Please stop what you're doing. And I'd be wholly shocked if I get a letter in whatever, pick a country. I get a letter in Arabic from Bahrain one day that says you're a bad person. You should stop what you're doing to save our country. So I think we're small enough and we're in technology, and they figure that they'll just handle it. The blunt force they handle everything with at a government law level. I think is my answer. Yep.
The game between censorship and anti-censorship. In your opinion, what's the next Catman chain? What's the next big censorship thing? What's the next big anti-censorship?
So I got asked that question at Interpol last year, and they asked me to do a presentation to scare the living crap out of Interpol. So I said, fully distributed peer-to-peer anonymous networks are your nightmare because you have to shut down the internet to stop that. And chances are the Facebooks and the Googles of the world are totally not going to let you shut down the internet to stop that. So you sort of see this with BitTorrent now, like the copyright, pro-copyright industries have been pushing hard to try to make BitTorrent illegal. BitTorrent's a fantastic file transfer protocol, regardless of what you transfer across it. If you do transfer lots of data, use BitTorrent. It works really well. It's how we send all our stuff out to every place in the world. Think about that peer-to-peer model, and then make it actually distributed so that there is no central directory authorities or anything like that. Then make it heavily encrypted and verifiable so that things like work. There are systems like this starting to come out, and they're becoming much more usable by the normal person off the street. And criminals will quickly pick up on that. And that will be the nightmare environment for law enforcement. Because if they don't already understand how IP addresses and all this other stuff works, law enforcement's job, from talking to them, their perspective is they have to learn like a million technologies, and they have to, because criminals will use whatever works. For the anti-censorship race, I think that's what's coming next. Is that Tor is already starting to look at how can we use BitTorrent, how can we use like peer-to-peer distributed directory authorities to get rid of the fact that there are 9 of them in the world right now, and 9 points of choke points. And there are other projects out there like UNUNet, Freenet does it to some degree, I2P does it to some degree, and then there's like swarm type stuff coming out that is the next scale of take Tor's obfuscating proxy stuff and stick it so that DPI doesn't recognize what it is, or DPI thinks it's valid, and then it just swarms out there and goes everywhere. And that's probably, I'm not even guess how many years off that is, but it's also going to be under the pressure of the more some governments and technologies crack down on your ability to evade censorship, the faster you're going to get the answer at the other end. So my analogy for Interpol is a water balloon, where you squeeze more water into one place, the water comes out the other places. You squeeze really hard, it pops, then you have water everywhere, and that's exactly what you don't want.
Okay. Last question.
So, if you were to advise the U.S. government on doing collecting information and surveillance, would you advise them to stop it as futile, or do you think it's useful for the U.S. government?
The U.S. government's a big place. The U.S. government funds us. The U.S. government funds us to be uncrackable and unbreakable and completely anonymous.
Right.
So that part of the U.S. government would say sure.
No, the part that actually collects information. And,
Yep.
Yeah. You think collection of information in a large scale is useless for the point of view of utility for the government? Is it just an annoyance because of people doing something stupid, or is there value to that?
Well, there are completely legitimate reasons to collect traffic and do data sampling and all that. One for like performance, all the basic stuff. My first answer is going to be transparency. Tell me what you're collecting and how you use it, and let me see it. There's no reason, in Europe, Facebook and Google and all of them have to give up all your data if you ask for it. Here's everything we've collected about you, here's everything you've given to us, here's all the metadata we collected about you. An Austrian guy did this and got like 26 DVDs back of data from Facebook, and he went through it and said, you missed another 20 DVDs of stuff. And I would much prefer that. Like I've worked with that when I go to London. People have said, we can request the government for all your CCTV video. And so there's a researcher out there collecting all my CCTV video from my trips to London, from the airport all the way to do the talk and back. Here's Andrew at 6 a.m. And of course I had the first reaction to, how did my hair look? But I think, they're going to collect it, and it's going to be sold as safety, security, whatever, whether it's relevant or not. You should have access to it. It's your data. I think that's the first step. And then once people realize how much is actually being collected about them, and when they can see it, then the discussion starts of why the hell are you collecting all this stuff? What do you do with it?
The question is there utility to collect, as a society? Do we want as a society to collect information about everybody or not? Is it good?
We've always collected information, just now it's really cheap to do it, and really pervasive.
We can decide to do it.
Sort of like DNA. Like I left my DNA all the way over, walking here, standing here. If you're law enforcement, you don't have to give me a drink to swab my saliva. You just stand here and collect my DNA. That discussion's already happening about DNA privacy and what you do with it. And I think, having just come back from Sweden for 10 days, they collect everyone's DNA at birth, and they do fantastic medical research with it, and figure out, all these people who live next to this nuclear power plant, they all have cancer. Maybe something's wrong with the nuclear power plant. Not something's wrong with these random people, and they assign resources based on the data they have. So I think you can have a better government in some ways when you have lots of data. It's just a matter of who gets access to it, who uses it, what's it used for. And now the police, and the big discussion in Sweden is the police now want access to the DNA database. So they can, instead of trying to go actually get samples for rape cases or child abuse cases or whatever, they can just list through all the DNA and grab the suspects directly. And those two silos were supposed to be separate always. And that's what the discussion is, of why are we doing this? How much safer are we?
Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks.